The story of Bakhum, who got lost within himself. I will tell you a story, one of the most beautiful. The story of Bakhum. Greed, which cannot be satisfied by anything. It's your story. Bakhum is the master of misery. This story is by the great Russian writer, Leo Tolstoy. How much land does a person need? The story revolves around a poor man who has no land. He works with his hands for others. His name is Bakhum. One night, he was sitting near the fireplace. On a winter night, he overheard a conversation between his wife and her sister, who came from the city to visit them. And she talked about the beauty of life in the city and the misery of rural life. But his wife didn't care about her sister's words. But Bakhum said to himself, "Ah, if I had a piece of land, even if it were small, to work for myself, not for others, then I won't care about anyone, even if it's the devil himself." Unfortunately, the devil was sitting behind him. He heard this and considered it a challenge. He said, "I accepted the challenge, and I will lead you to your doom." The story in brief. After a short while, there was a lady, the owner of large lands in that village. She wanted to sell a piece of land, and the farmers rushed to buy it. Bakhum said to himself, "Why not buy it?" Then he sold his cells, and he had a small horse. He hired his 2 sons to work on a farm for a year, and they received the full wage in advance. He borrowed the remaining amount from a relative. He paid half the price of the land, 40 acres. The remaining amount will be paid within 2 years. After a year, he was lucky, and the crops were very abundant. The remaining crop was very abundant. The remaining amount was paid off in 1 year. He said, "Now I will live the good life I wanted." But, in a short period, the problems started. Because of his neighbors, those who left their livestock to graze on his land. The problems escalated, and I went to the courts and the judiciary. He said, "What a miserable life." Now he has started to see another side of wealth and ownership. One day, the farmer's friend passed by the farmer's village to visit him at his home. And he told him that there in the land of the Volga, there are vast and fertile lands, and the people there are generous. And whoever wants to live and cultivate those lands, they will give him 25 acres for free, and they will help him. Then he took his wife and children, and he sold all his land and possessions, and they moved to the Volga. In fact, they gave him 5 pieces. Indeed, they gave him 5 pieces. To him, his wife, and his children. He got 125 acres. It was new land, very fertile. It grows more than double what his previous land used to grow. Then he started buying and selling. After a few years, he owns 1,300 acres. Finally, he felt that fate had smiled upon him and brought him happiness. But one day, a merchant came to visit him. He said to him that there is a distant land, dozens of miles away. It is inhabited by naive people, but they are very generous and lovable. Their name is Bashkir. They have very vast agricultural lands, where the sun never sets. They give those who want it what they want at lower prices. He told him, "I bought even 13,000 acres for just 1,000 rubles. He was astonished. Imagine how he had nothing before. But now he was craving 13,000 acres. And he said, "I have 1,000 rubles, I have that. So why do we stay here only on 1,300 acres? With 1,000 rubles, I'll get 10 times the land." He sold everything he had and went to the land of the Bashkirs. His friends said to him, "Just honor them with gifts, and they will honor you as well." They will help you with what you want." He did that and took many gifts with him on his way. So he gave them, and they honored him. They asked him what he wanted, so he told them. They told him, "Take whatever you want from the land." He told them that he wants to buy the land legally. "How much do you want for the land?" They said, 1,000 rubles all day. He didn't understand. They answered him, "We do not use the measurements you have. Rather, we estimate the land and its price by the distance a person walks on it in one day, starting from sunrise, but they must return to the point where they started before sunset, even if it's just 1 minute after, and this land is worth 1,000 rubles. But if he is even 1 minute late after sunset, he loses both the 1,000 rubles and the land." Bakhum was very pleased, paid the 1,000 rubles, and prepared for the journey the next day, dreaming of the vast land he would own tomorrow and how very spacious it would be. And early in the morning, he arrived at the place they had designated for the interview. The chief of the elders said to him, "Look, all this vast plain is yours, but keep to the terms, either the money becomes ours and the land yours, or you lose both the money and the land." Bakhum began his journey running with all his might, and whenever he covered a significant distance and wanted to stop, the fertility of the land tempted him to keep running. He kept running and running until midday, and exhaustion set in, so he sat down for a moment, ate some food, and took a few sips of water. Then he got up to start heading back. So he started running to the second side, and when he saw that time had passed, he began panting to the third side. And the afternoon had approached, so he thought of returning to the point where he started to avoid losing everything, but he felt extremely tired. He began to take off his clothes piece by piece until even his shoes could not be tolerated, so he took them off and started running, his feet being torn by thorns and sharp stones. And when the fatigue became unbearable, he thought of sitting down to rest, even for a moment, but he saw the sun descending towards the horizon, so he drew strength from his weakness and began to run, his breaths coming out in rapid succession, barely releasing one before the next followed. And before he reached the foot of the mountain, the sun set, and he collapsed and trembled violently. But he remembered that the sun sets at the foot before the peak, so he fought again and began to run with all the faint remnants of determination and strength he had left. And when he arrived just before the last ray of sunlight disappeared, the group welcomed him with great cheers, and the leader said to Bacchus, "Congratulations on the piece of land you acquired, it's very large." As soon as Bakhum extended his hand to shake the president's hand, blood erupted from his mouth, and he fell to the ground. His servant rushed to help him, but he had already become a lifeless corpse,